So the question, of course, is what can we learn from this? And I want to portray the kind of lessons by their impact on outcomes. No? The less important things are put to the bottom, the more important things are put to the top. And then I take into account the technical, political, and financial feasibility. No? Everybody wants to focus on the things that are easy to do and very important. No? We call them the quick wins. Nobody wants to invest in things that are very expensive and not so important. Unfortunately, it's not so easy. There's a lot in education that happens in this quadrant. I want to talk also about the kind of things that are really, really important. Teaching, quality of teachers, but very, very hard to get right. There's no quick fix to this. And then let's talk about some low-hanging fruits, things that are easy to do, but maybe not so important. So when you look at this diagram, you can actually map a series of policy lessons and lessons for practice that transcend most cultural boundaries. These things are true in most cultures and most countries and most languages in most political contexts. And the first thing I want to highlight is the value that a country places on education. One of the things that we see in high-performing education systems is that everybody expects every student to succeed. It's the belief that learning is not about talent, but learning is about effort, investment, and support. And this is a deeply rooted belief in many education systems that are doing well. Parents understand it, teachers understand it, schools understand it, students understand it. And what we see in countries is that they usually have universal, highly pitched educational standards. These countries are very, very strong in giving people the message of what strong performance is, as opposed to believing, like in my country, for example, that students are born with different talents, they're given different educational opportunities, they are sent to different schools, and sort of education is about sorting people. And there's also a very, very good understanding of who is responsible for student success. If you go to the Nordic countries, for example, to Denmark, to Finland, Sweden in some parts, it's very interesting. When at the end of the school year, students do not only get school marks, but every teacher sits together with every student and their parents to discuss those outcomes. And the golden rule in those parent-student-teacher dialogues is that you're not allowed to complain about someone else. You know? As a teacher, you're not allowed to complain about the student. As a parent, you're not allowed to complain about the teacher. But everybody has to think about, what can I do to improve the outcomes? And we have actually some really interesting data on this in the context of PISA. We ask students not what they believe in their abilities. You know, do they think they are good in mathematics or not? Actually, one of the problems in Italy is that many students believe they are better in mathematics than they actually are. They get good marks in school, even if their performance is not good. And that's actually not something that is conducive to outcomes. But when you ask them a different question, when you ask them, you know, are you confident that you can overcome unforeseen challenges, difficulties? You can see that many Italian students are more on the left side of the chart. Better say no. You know, this problem is too hard for me. When you look to many of the high-performing countries, not all of them, students have great abilities, but they're also confident that they can master the unforeseen challenges. You can see Shanghai, very much to the right, very much to the top corner. We ask students one simple question. We ask them, what do you believe makes you successful in mathematics? And students in Italy or many other European countries, or even more so in the United States, often tell you success in mathematics. That's very clear. That's a question of talent. You know, if I'm not born as a genius, I better study something else. If you ask that very same question to students in China or Japan, 9 out of 10 students tell you success in mathematics. You know, if I really try hard, I trust that my teachers will help me, and I'm going to be successful. And this tells you a lot about the education system. In one case, you know, students are given the impression, you know, education is just a big machine that sorts people and some will survive and others not. You know, I can't do very much about it. In the other case, students are given in an environment that mobilizes everyone. that is an enabling environment where everyone feels that they can succeed. Very important. And you can actually see this also in some data. We ask students, who is to blame for failure? And here I show you the average, kids in China and kids in Italy. For example, in Italy, many students who are not doing well in mathematics, they say, well, I was just unlucky. Or the course material was too hard, or my teacher didn't teach me well, or my teacher didn't really motivate me to learn. All things that are out of my control. You ask the same questions to people in China? Also happens for some students, but not for so many. Students see themselves more as the owners of their success, a very, very important part of a successful education system. It has also to do with parents. This is interesting. In fact, if your parents expect you to go on to school, advance in education, value education, you can see, and that's true in Italy even more so than in other countries, you're even more likely to enjoy mathematics. You're not only doing better in mathematics, but you're also more likely to enjoy. You're more likely to sort of see this as something that is important to you. You're more likely to be persistent in mathematics, trying hard even if things are difficult. And now people say, well, not every parent can do this because it's a matter of academic qualifications, time investment as a parent for homework and so on. But it's actually very little to do with this. What our data show is that the simple question parents ask every day, how was school today, explains more in learning outcomes than the social context of students from which they come from. Very simple things that parents can do in terms of showing their children that what they do in school actually matters for them as parents. So what I'm showing you here, this value in education, is really something that has to do with the entire environment. Giving students a sense that actually success is something to do with effort and that success is possible. Raising the expectations for all students, also the most disadvantaged. Leaving no student behind in the expectation. This is one important dimension. Gateways and instructional system. What we see in high-performing education systems, they have very rigorous examination system typically. It's very, very difficult to get a good grade. And some people misinterpret this. I was in Spain speaking with the Minister of Education and some officials there, and they told me, well, if we introduce a tough examination system, then some students will not succeed and they will drop out. And these exams will become a barrier for student success. You could think like this. But then I asked them, well, but today Spain doesn't have any exam, and Spain has the highest rate of dropout in school. So these things are not related. In fact, we see the opposite. The more demanding the expectations of the education systems are, the more rigorous the evaluation is and the examination, the more students are actually part of the education system. Take it serious, invest the effort, and ultimately succeed. Very, very important. And as you can see here, it's also to do with connecting the examination, the evaluation, with the instructional system. Making sure that what's being taught in the classroom is really well aligned with all of this. High level of metacognitive content, I come back to this. Very, very important as well. Giving students a sense learning is not just about stuff, about material in the curriculum, but it's about what underpins them. It's the understanding that, mathematics and history, all of these are languages with which we can understand structure, predict the world. Where countries do that well, you see better success rate on these international comparisons. Just a couple of data points on this. One way, it's sort of the inverse of high-stakes gateways, is the practice of grade repetition. And that is still quite common in Italy, not as common as in some other countries. No? But there are a lot of students who are basically told at the end of the school year, we didn't do well enough, try once more. And our data actually show that that's very, very ineffective. It is expensive, it's stigmatizing, and it doesn't yield better learning outcomes. And it also makes the work of teachers in schools far more too easy. It's very easy to say to yourself, well, I didn't succeed with this student this year, let somebody else deal with it next year. That's actually some of the things that actually are not very productive. And they're also very expensive. Look at the cost associated with this. Of course, you know, when you think about the direct cost the Ministry of Education has to spend on a grade repeater, this is not a lot of money. You know? You just send a kid once more to school. But you also have to factor in that that child will stay one more year out of the labor market, out of their future, pays 1 year less taxes. No? And if you add the cost up like this, in a country like Italy, you spend about 45,000 euro per student per year on this. Imagine if the education system would give that money to you in a classroom. What you could do with this. No? It's just one of the examples how we're not using resources very productively. No? We use them to deal with failure rather than proactively actually leverage better outcomes. No? Just one example, grade repetition, a very expensive, very ineffective policy. And you don't see that happening in high-performing education systems. In Asia and Northern Europe, it doesn't exist. Every student is given the support they need. Go to Finland. I told you before, Finland is not as expensive as an education system as Italy. But Finland spends about 30% of instruction time outside the classroom. Teachers have a lot of means, a lot of resources to actually invest in the individual success of students, in groups, in small groups, individually. No? It's not left up to private tutoring or parents. The school provides the environment for every student to succeed. And how do they pay for it? Well, you see that on this chart. They have a lot of money for this.